Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is always a difficult slot after lunch, but I did get the bright dress memo, so hopefully that will keep everybody awake. Now, earlier on our F&B panel, Ursula talked about human connection, and Philip talked about investing in your people. So I'm going to take a little bit of a shift away from your commercial conversations and talk about our most important asset, which is obviously our people, and hopefully encourage you to think with a little bit of a different perspective around how we use strengths as a critical business driver, and also how playing to your strengths can really drive individual performance. So like any HR person, I'm not going to stand up here and talk the whole time. A little bit of audience participation is going to be required, so watch out for that. So what I'd like you to do is pull out one of these wonderful Concord pads in front of you and a pen, and put your pen in your dominant hand, so the hand that you normally write with, and it's really easy. All you have to do is write down your first name. So write down your first name with your dominant hand. Done? Easy? All right. Here comes the hard part. Switch the pen into your other hand. Now we want you to write your name with your non-dominant hand. Few giggles. Is it legible? So hands up from the audience who found it really easy to write their name with their dominant hand. Only one person? A couple? Yes, a few? Okay, who found it really easy to write with their non-dominant hand? One person, two, with maybe some hidden strengths in this room. Who found it a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit uneasy to write your name with your non-dominant hand? Okay, great. Really simple activity to explain a little bit about strengths. Often there are things, unique talents that we are really good at, and we just put those to the side, and commonly in our business and as leaders, we always focus on the things that we're not so good at, the areas of development, the weaknesses, just like your non-dominant hand. Now, I work for Accor, and we love telling stories at Accor, so I'm going to start by telling you a quick story about my son. My son's name is Jackson, and he's almost 15 years old. Anyone else got children in the room? And teenagers? Oh, yeah, that's like our real job, isn't it? So, I, like many parents, probably remember right back, like it was yesterday, when my son was just a little toddler and he was, trotting around the house. I remember this very specifically about my son. I would put 3, 4, 5 puzzles on the ground, and I would mess all the pieces up, and miraculously, he would put them all together in the right place very, very quickly. So we can tell that my son's quite creative, and he has a number of very unique talents. As he grew older, this creativity really, really shone through as something that it motivated him, it gave him confidence, and it was something that he really, really enjoyed. Now, fast forward to age 11, around about the time that we moved to Dubai. We've been here about 5 years, and he's diagnosed with acute dyslexia. You imagine how heartbreaking that is for a young man who's pretty confident, and all of a sudden, we know as his parents he's got these really unique qualities, but he gets made to feel like he's the dumbest kid in the class. So instead of somebody really focusing on those creative qualities, they call out the math scores in class, and he's the one that's got the single digits, less than 5. So my husband and I have, dedicated the last couple of years to really studying dyslexia, and for those that don't know too much about it, it's certainly not a disability, it's just a learning preference and a learning style. And I'm not going to ask people in the room to put your hand up if you know exactly what I'm talking about. But for him, it's really interesting, because when somebody tells you that you're different, we have a habit of thinking that this is true, but also the social norms have a habit of sort of putting you, in a box. The most amazing thing is that we have focused on this, and we've really tried to shift our perspective, and through a lot of work, our son now knows that his dyslexia is his superpower, and continues to, which is a great thing. So I guess the moral of my story is, all of us have very unique talents. We have things that we were born into this world that we were just really good at and we're motivated for. However, we still live in a bit of a weakness-focused world. Let's think about the performance appraisal process. Who in this room, your organisation, still has the annual performance review? Yep. And most likely, within that conversation, you're talking about, right, next year, what are your weaknesses? What are your areas for growth that you're going to focus on in the next 12 months? Some of you might have shifted beyond this, and you might have a little bit more of a continuous feedback culture in your organisation, but this word of weaknesses, it still comes up. So we live in this weaknesses world, and so what I'd like to talk to you about today as leaders, commercial leaders that have really senior roles in some of the best hospitality organisations across the region, is to shift our perspective a little bit. So to introduce exactly what are strengths and a bit more, I've got a really short video to show you. I know, Will.
People everywhere are talking about the benefits and value of using their strengths at work more of the time. So let's look a little more closely at our definition of strengths, what they are and what they're not, why strengths matter, what might get in the way and what you can do about it. So firstly, what are strengths? Strengths are underlying qualities that energise you. Strengths aren't skills. You can learn to be world class at something, but if you're not using your strengths to make it happen, you'll deliver a great job but feel exhausted. Often we focus on defining skills, knowledge and behaviours associated with success in a particular role. Unlike this, strengths are related to the person and not the role. Both are important, but strengths are often the part that people miss when they think about their development, or what they can bring to a role or situation. It's when you combine your strengths, your skills and knowledge, and align these with an organisation's goals that you can achieve sustainable peak performance. Think of your strengths as your engine to get things done, the wind in your sails. This matters because knowing and using your strengths has been shown to make a direct difference to people's well-being, motivation, creative problem solving, self-confidence and teamwork.
It's like the audio didn't quite keep up with the video. So what I like, a key word from that video, is the wind in your sails. So my question here now is going to revert out to the audience, and I think I've got someone with a couple of microphones. Yes, she's there ready. So in a moment I'm going to ask you a little bit about strengths, but let's just see a show of hands. Who in this room has done some sort of assessment, or you feel fairly confident that you know what your strengths are, what your wind in your sails are? Few people? Okay, thank you. Thanks for your honesty. What about the people in your team? So you might know what your strengths are. Has anyone done an activity to understand, well, what are the unique strengths of your team? Small handful of people. Okay. So then this leads to the question of, are you aware of how these strengths will influence your performance and your team's performance? So my question for you, I'd love to hear from 2 or 3 of you, why focus on strengths? We've seen the video, we've seen a couple of the benefits, but from your point of view and your organisation's point of view, why focus on strengths? Who wants to start? So we have this thing at Accor which we get you to volunteer, but then we move to being voluntold. All right, thank you so much.
Hi. When you focus on your strengths, it outweighs your weaknesses.
So say that again, when you focus on your strengths.
If you focus on your strengths, they outweigh your weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it makes, illuminates them a little less.
Correct.
Yeah, is that what you're saying? Thank you. Let's round of applause for, being the first person. Okay, I'm looking for somebody else. And my plan B is always my Accor people in the room, but why focus on strengths? As a leader, why is it important? Thank you.
To capitalize most of your, to capitalize.
To capitalize, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. To capitalize on
whatever you're good at.
Yeah, okay, to make sure that it can be quite situational, but for sure, to make sure you're capitalizing or optimizing. Sure, thank you.
I think your strength is your weapon, so why you need to hold it. So, and since we are in the FIFA season now, I will give an example. So if I have the best players in my team, I will not put them on the bench. I will put them to drive the result for me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the World Cup reference. Thank you.
I think strengths brings you to a personal happiness. And
Yes.
when you are happy, obviously your results are successful, or your results are more, strong, or
Yeah.
it brings you to a more successful person.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if anybody's been in a job before where they are required to continually do a job that takes a lot of energy and time because it's not something that's an innate strength. It's really not enjoyable. It doesn't give you fulfillment. Thank you.
Hello, Debbie. I think strengths comes with another word, which is success, because I think when you're playing on your strengths, you're more closer to success. So it takes less of an effort and it's more of an enjoyment.
Yeah, I like that, Gaurav. Thank you. Sometimes people might say the combination of knowing their strengths could be their success profile. I think we had a hand up over here as well. We'll make this the last one.
I would say to have a higher level of energy and validity, and that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you think about the amount of energy that it takes to have a team and cohesion, if those things are things that come naturally, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. So I guess the interesting thing is if we can identify the benefits of focusing on strengths, why is it that we are still in this weakness-focused world? Let's have a look at that a little bit more. So just to sort of recap on some of the thoughts in the room, a strength-based approach allows you to enhance performance, resilience, and engagement much quicker, and is a much more sustainable approach than where leaders or organisations place emphasis on areas for development. When employees, so if you think of yourselves in the room, those that put their hand up earlier, said you know your strengths, they're much more engaged, they perform better, and they're less likely to leave the company. Now, me, myself, I'm going to share a little insight to some of my strengths a little bit later on, but one of them is that I like constant change. So if I think about a role where I'm going to perform exceptionally well, and this is all about peak performance at the end of the day, I can't work for an organisation where there's going to be monotony. If I was just doing the same thing day in, day out, that's going to be something that's really not energising for me in particular. So if we look at Gallup, and Gallup is one of the organisations that we refer to a lot when we're talking about strengths, building employees' strengths is a far more effective approach to improving performance than trying to improve weaknesses. So hopefully I'm starting to plant a little bit of a seed for all of you. So we know from the research that Gallup does, and they've got over 90 years of studying human nature and human behaviour, we know that people are 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life if they focus on strengths. And we also know that they're 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs. People that know their strengths and therefore work in what we call the strengths zone look forward to going to work because they're energised and they're engaged. They have much more positive as opposed to negative interactions with their co-workers because there's this really nice synergy. They tend to treat our customers, clients, guests much better. They tell their friends that they work for a great company. They have positive, creative and innovative moments because they're working with something that is innately a motivator for them. And they tend to achieve more on a daily basis. They tend to find that they get themselves in this state of flow. I don't know if anyone's heard of this state of flow before, where you're almost working and doing what you enjoy almost effortlessly. People who focus on their strengths also maximise their potential. And as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about peak performance. So from the studies from Gallup, and for this particular study, they interviewed nearly 1,000 sales and revenue people. And they found out that people who use their strengths every day have 7.8% greater productivity. They also studied some other organisations and found that teams that receive strengths feedback have 8.9% greater profitability. So these are shifting the narrative from saying, hey, so-and-so, and telling them what they did wrong, next time you need to do this, this, and this. It's having a conversation that talks about what they did well and what they should continue to do. So I'm sure many of your organisations are perhaps experimenting with the same sort of concepts that we are at Accor, but we shifted about 18 months ago away from a one-off performance appraisal process. So we used to have an annual appraisal that was really long, took leaders, many, many hours, and really the quality of those conversations wasn't great. So we shifted to a more continuous feedback process and a strength-based focus as well. So both these things at the same time. So what our leaders are required to do, and we try and give them flexibility, but they have these check-in or checkpoint conversations regularly. They might be once a month, once a quarter, but we encourage them to have 3 or 4 during a year. These are short conversations that focus on a couple of key questions. The first question, what have you done well? What's going well for you? So it's a strengths-orientated question. The next question is, what have you learnt? Or what would you have done differently? Next question is, let's go a bit future-focused and talk about how can you keep making sure that what's going well continues to go well, and where do you need more help from me? So there's nothing in there that sort of talks about your areas of development or focuses on those areas of development. I did see a few chuckles around the room. Yes, I am, well, home is Australia, but I was born in New Zealand. I have a lot of trouble saying the word check-in, because it does sound like chicken, often, yep. So what we do know, all that being said, that most people don't have the opportunity to focus on what they do best. We know, and many of you might have heard the stories from Google, they have something called 20% time. So you have 80% of your job, and then you have 20% where you get to work on whatever tickles your fancy, the thing that you're really motivated in, an area that you're really, really strong at. And there is evidence within Google to show that a lot of their innovations come from 20% time. The interesting thing is when researched, and this is again through Gallup, this question was asked, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. The research shows that only 1 in 3 people strongly agree with this statement. So there's a lot of people out there that are not having the opportunity to do what they do exceptionally well. Now, with all this being said, I'm not suggesting that we ignore weaknesses or opportunities for development. Okay, it's really important for people to reach a level of mastery in their role. We're going to be continuously learning. The market is changing. There are trends that are happening. We've got to make sure that we continue to keep our knowledge up to date. We need to know what's going on with our competitors. So there's always going to be gaps. There's going to be blind spots. So we certainly don't ignore our weaknesses, but we're not going to make them the primary focus for ourselves, and we're certainly not going to make them the primary focus for our teams, because there's a lot of evidence that shows us that that is detrimental to productivity, detrimental to engagement, confidence, fulfillment. So we need to be aware of the weaknesses of ourselves or our team and make sure that we're managing them. Our greatest opportunity for success lies in developing and optimizing our individual and collective strengths. So if we think a little bit about my strength profile, so I stand up here in front of you talking about strengths, having quite a good understanding of my own. Who here has heard of the Gallup, Clifton Gallup Strengths Assessment? Put your hand up, there's a couple of people. Yeah, it's one of the most common. So you can actually jump online and do this for free and just get your top 5, or you can pay and get your top 34. And what it gives you are the things that are innately motivating for you. So number 1 for me is actually futuristic. So I'm really quite a visionary. I'm always thinking about the future. I'm also a strong communicator, an includer, an ideator, and did I say communication? Not sure if I said that, but the important thing to remember is that sometimes your strengths can be a weakness as well. So this is why we can't ignore them. Communication, I'm great at sharing information, but I also love to talk. So when I'm standing in front of my executives and I need to give a very succinct presentation, it takes a lot of effort and practice to make sure that I am doing that. So it's all about a shift in perspective, really. This is Don Clifton from Gallup, and he says, what do we think would happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on what is wrong with them? Food for thought for everyone to think about. So if everybody in the room, we always like to make sure we give some practical tips. So how can you shift when you walk out of this room today and be a little bit more of a strength-based leader? First and foremost, identify strengths. And I'm going to share with you in a moment 2 tools that you might want to suggest to your organisation. Really, really useful to understand, what are the things that I'm innately good at and what are the things that my team are really good at. So in my particular team, I know that I'm futuristic, so I have quite a strategic theme to my strengths. but I don't have a lot of execution themes. So fortunately, as I've used strengths assessments in my team, I know I've got a few executors. So you can work together and you can make sure that those strengths are complementing one another. You might ask, do we use strength profiles in recruitment? And the answer is no. We don't use them to recruit. We use them to make sure that we're optimizing a team and we're looking at peak performance. So identifying strengths is first. Assigning teams and projects based on strengths. Give people projects, give them tasks that they're really good at. So I've just hired somebody into a digital learning role, and in his spare time, he's a multimedia producer. I've already given him a couple of tasks that are right spot on in that sweet spot, and it's effortless, it's high quality, it's incredible what he's able to do. Focus on developing people's strengths. So one of the key illusions that people have is if you have a strength, it'll always maintain to be a strength for you. And when we're having development conversations at a call with people, we certainly talk on, areas of development, what's going to help you in the next 12 months to really get to mastery. But we also talk about people's strengths and what do we need to do to make sure that those strengths in the next 12 months can remain strengths for you. What are the things that are going to contribute to that? Find talent that fills the gaps. So knowing what the strengths are in your team is really handy. And as I say, we don't use strength assessments for recruitment, but it's a really nice way to sort of put a team together. Implement a strength-based culture. Now you might say, look, my organisation is not at the point where we're ready to do that. But that's not going to hold you back as a leader in starting today. So we know the leadership landscape is changing, far less hierarchical. We know that there's much more hybrid working. We know that leadership is much more decentralised than it ever has been before. Coaching conversations and making sure that you focus on the strengths of individuals and that we really personalise and customise our development journeys for people is really where 21st century leadership development is at. And lastly, everybody has got something that they bring to the table. Everybody's got something that they're good at. And not one person in this room is going to have the same strength profile as the person next to you. So we have to believe as a leader, everybody brings something. It's just how do we use that and how do we optimize that? So as we bring my presentation to a close, I guess just a few parting thoughts to recap. Every person has a unique set of strengths. Even your worst performers or your talent risks have a set of strengths. It just might be that they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So everybody has a unique set of strengths. A strength-based approach is a different and new way of thinking. So if you think back to the story about my son, we could adopt a thought that, he's just going to go through his life really struggling and everything's going to be an effort, which is true, but we choose to focus on the things that he's really, really good at. He's creative, he's empathetic, he loves helping out, he's a great friend. There's a lot of things, a lot of qualities, and we remind him of those qualities often. By focusing on what people do well, and making sure that we develop these strengths, I promise you, people will be even more and more productive. So the key to success is to fully understand how to apply your greatest talents and strengths in your everyday life. And for those that want a little bit more information, if you're still hungry, I talked about Gallup Strengths, which is what we use, but there's also a fantastic organisation go online called StrengthScope. So here's a couple of takeaways for you to go and research if you want to do a little bit more. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. Pleasure.